All right.
I don't know why you're getting angry. I don't know why.
It's because that's silly, and you're a smart individual, and it's extreme.
I'm Justin Lesko, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt and former pro MMA fighter.
And I'm Mike Callahan, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt and a law enforcement officer.
This episode is loaded with heavyweights. After the heavyweight fights at UFC 252, the UFC Heavyweight title picture is suddenly very crowded, so we're going to try and make sense of it.
And after another controversial eye poke at UFC 252, we're going to take a look at the rules in MMA and Jiu-Jitsu and talk about what rules we would change if we could in both sports.
Welcome to That Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. So for anyone who didn't see the fight, as I predicted, Stipe defeated DC in the third fight of their trilogy at UFC 252. Stipe retained the heavyweight title, and Daniel Cormier has since retired from MMA. You think he's going to stay retired? I think he might not.
Yeah, I think he will. Stipe's got to fight Ngannou next, and then they're talking about John Jones moving up, and maybe a circumstance that I could see arising is Jones beats whoever has the title, and that might, tempt Cormier to come out of it, but you're talking a year and a half from now, till that potential fight even happens. He'll be 42, 43 years old. I don't know. He's got a pretty sweet gig with the UFC, with the commentating. He's very good at it.
I agree. I think Daniel Cormier is a good commentator. When Amanda Jean and I watch the fights, she does get annoyed because he does have a heavy bias towards wrestlers, and she hates when people take people down and just lay on top of them, and Daniel Cormier loves that. So Amanda Jean doesn't like him so much as a commentator, but he said it after his fight with Stipe. He was retiring, and he's only interested in fighting for titles anymore, and he doesn't see titles are going to come anymore. Yeah. And I don't disagree with him. So even removing a huge piece of the heavyweight title picture in Daniel Cormier, it's still stacked with people who could fight for the belt. Dana has said that Francis is going to fight for the title, and pretty much everyone else in the rankings, Francis has already beat, so he's like the logical next step. And we'll talk about that fight, obviously, but there's just a ton of guys right now in the heavyweight division, and they all have legitimate claims to fighting for the belt.
Yeah, it was it's a very competitive division right now, and you throw in the wild card of John Jones bumping up.
Yeah.
If John Jones walks into that octagon at 235, 240 pounds, and he's athletic, and he's probably longer than 95% of the heavyweights in there, 99% of the heavyweights in there.
Well,
I think he's got like an 84-inch reach.
Yeah, something ridiculous.
It's crazy.
He has a longer reach than, I think he had the same reach as Stefan Struve, who was like 8,000 feet tall, the tallest fighter ever in the UFC, I think.
I don't know about that.
Close to it. If he's not the tallest, he's in the short list of really tall guys who fought in the UFC.
Gan McGee, Tim Sylvia.
I think Stefan Struve is taller than both of those guys, but
maybe
we could do a quick Google search.
I'm not fact checking. I'm not fact checking. But he.
Yeah. Well, so John Jones.
If he enters that division, it just. I mean, he's a needle mover. Like he's a Conor McGregor. And I know that Dana White said that he's not, but like the intrigue that would surround that move to heavyweight would be unparalleled.
Yeah, and again, if anyone missed it, John Jones basically vacated his light heavyweight title. He said it's over contract negotiations. We talked about this previously on this show, how he's wanted more money for a while. I personally just think he's biding his time until he moves up to heavyweight. Because if you truly were not going to fight again, you would officially retire, you'd withdraw from the USADA testing pool, and he made some statement about he's going to stay in the testing pool just in case, see what happens. I think he's just going to be powerlifting like he was a couple years ago, put on
without the steroids,
without the juice, or with it, because USADA doesn't really do their job that well. And he's eventually going to be he's going to move up to heavyweight. That's going to be the play. And he just, like you said, jumps right into title picture. If you're John Jones and you move to heavyweight, I don't think you have to fight a fight before the championship. I think you jump right to a title fight.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, this has happened. Like McGregor jumped right up and fought for the title at 55. Cormier jumped right up and fought for the title at heavyweight. Amanda Nunes jumped right up and fought for the title at 45 when she fought Cyborg. Cejudo didn't have any fights at 35. I think he just jumped right up. And none of these fighters that I just mentioned have had a dominant run.
Yeah,
as dominant of a run as John Jones has had.
Yeah, so, I mean,
if he decides to move to heavyweight, I think he should get a title shot right away. But that remains to be seen. Let me just say this real quick. I fucking hate when people say that fighters are scared. So Dominic Reyes came at. Did you see this?
I did. I was going to bring this up next, but I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Right. So Dominic Reyes came out and at first he was kind of cordial, or not cordial, but like civil about it. He was like, "I'll catch you next time." And then they announced that he's going to be fighting for the title, for the vacant title against Jan. And then he starts his shit talking.
Yeah.
And he starts saying that John Jones is scared and that he thinks that the contenders around him got too good. It's like, my guy.
Yeah.
This fucking dude has sat on top of this division for the better part of the last decade. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, he's fought everybody. He's not fucking scared. Like, I think it's crazy when people say, like, you're scared to fight. Like, this is what they do for a living. I'm sure that people get nervous and anxious and everything, but like, it's just it's such a douche thing to say. Here we go with the douche thing again. But it's such a douche thing to say when you say that a fighter, not to mention the greatest light heavyweight fighter in the history of the sport, and potentially the greatest fighter in the history of the sport.
I disagree with the way he sort of delivered that message. I agree with you. John Jones is not scared of Dominic Reyes, but I think John Jones is aware that his biggest test against Dominic Reyes, I don't think he's confident he would win the fight again. That's not the same as being scared. I think he just realizes that the game may be catching up to him as he gets a little older in that division. I can also sympathize with John Jones in the sense of, if you've been on top of that division for 10 years, right? Like, maybe it just doesn't excite you anymore fighting the same carousel of guys at light heavyweight, and you want to go up to heavyweight and test yourself against Stipe. I get that sentiment as well. But yeah, I don't think Dominic Reyes I don't think he actually believes John Jones is scared. I think he's trying to say something he knows that would annoy John Jones. I don't agree with him, but I think that he might have a point that some of the contenders are closing the gap on John Jones.
Yeah. I mean, it's whatever. I don't like it. It's like Dominic Reyes beat Chris Weidman in Weidman's first fight at 205, and then he got a title shot. It's like,
but I do think Dominic Reyes beat John Jones, and I know you don't, but I do think so.
No, he didn't. It's okay.
Well, even if you remove John Jones, right? You say John Jones doesn't go to heavyweight. You removed him. You removed Daniel Cormier from the picture. You still have Francis Ngannou. You have Curtis Blades. Someone would say you have Overeem. I disagree. You have Rosenstruck. You have Derek Lewis. Did I already say Derek Lewis?
No, but he's fighting Curtis Blades.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting fight. That fight's in November. The time of this recording, it's August still, so it's kind of a far way away. The thing about, I mentioned in the beginning, Ngannou has wins over Blades.
Yeah.
He's got a win over, well, he got a
Rosenstruck.
He's got a win over Rosenstruck, a damn good win over Rosenstruck too.
Yeah.
He's got a win over Overeem. He has a loss to Derek Lewis in what I think is widely considered the worst fight in the history of the UFC between Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou, because they didn't do anything for the entire round or the entire fight, and they just walked around. I I'm intrigued by Ngannou versus Stipe in the rematch in the second fight. I think Ngannou has improved since that fight, but I still think he's the same. He's the same fighter. He's a different version of. He's relying on his power. He's hoping to catch Stipe and knock him out. He's not going to wrestle him. He's not going to grapple him. It's just going to be trying to gadoosh him into the front row.
Stipe beat him pretty easily before. So.
I did not watch that fight live because that fight, the first fight between Ngannou and Stipe, was on my wedding.
The same day I took you down in front of your entire fucking wedding party in the bar room.
False.
It's not false.
So we're at my wedding, at the reception, and Mike Callahan comes up and he tries to take me down, and I'm pretty sure I like lat dropped you and then like passed your guard immediately, and then like
yeah, so here's a couple things. Number one, I don't drink whiskey, and you animals were shoveling shots of either one of the Irish whiskeys, either Tullamore Dew
I think it was Jameson.
Or Jameson. It was you and Junior and Patty. Yep. And like I feel like I don't want to compare myself to a gremlin. Okay. Like it's not like it's not like there should be a warning label of don't feed him anything past midnight, don't get him wet, don't give him Jameson. But if you keep doing it, right? Like you're inviting.
We knew what we were getting.
Right, you did. You knew what was going on, and there was no lateral drop. We were hand fighting. Then we started wrestling. Then I pulled guard, came up for a modified X guard sweep, came up with the single leg on my shoulder. And because it was your wedding, I chose not to launch you over the bar.
It's funny how we have very different memories of the events.
We couldn't be any more different. I don't think, and this is, I'm not blowing smoke. I don't think you've ever taken me down in a sparring session.
I'm not a wrestler. I'm not a.
Yeah. So I don't think you've ever taken me down. That's a lie, because I do actually remember in a training session getting lateral drop by you because I was totally unsuspecting of it. With that being said, is it a coincidence that all of a sudden that now you're saying that you lateral drop me?
Well, that's my
wedding?
go-to. If anyone's listening and ever rolls against me, it's my go-to.
Didn't fucking happen.
Either way,
so it was in the bar room, but like the room was, there was how many people were at your wedding?
Yeah,
it was packed. It was like 200 people there.
When we say the bar, like it was not a bar. It was the bar at the like mansion we got married in. Yeah. And we always tell the story because Amanda's cousin's boyfriend is like works security or something, and he saw was me, who he's met a few times, on my wedding, rolling on the floor with someone he doesn't know. So apparently he like starts coming over like he's gonna break up a fight, and people were like, no, they do that. It's fine. They do that.
Yeah, that was one of the most dangerous. Like outside of like a fight to win. Like, did you ever go to like those fight to wins? And you're like, this is the most dangerous room I've ever been in my life.
Yeah,
right?
I think what actually, I think what actually started the whole thing was we were at the bar with a bunch of the people we train with, and I was like, oh, in this entire room, all these people, these are the only guys who could actually beat me up. And then I think I turned to my right and it was like, not him, and pointed at you, which I think started the whole process. So yeah. I brought it on myself.
Yeah, we've said this before on here, but we're smart and articulate, and we can be gentlemen.
I mean, I was wearing a 3-piece suit and a pocket watch. I was looking good and fancy, and
killed 3 people for this pocket watch. 3 people died.
All I know is that Amanda Jean.
Yeah, but at the core, we're Neanderthals.
Yeah. But Amanda Jean and Diana J were both happy because you kept your pants on in an environment where you were drinking. So that's a win for everybody, because it usually doesn't happen that way.
And it's been known to happen. My wife, like, she's when we have these conversations, she says, "You don't do that anymore."
That she knows about.
And I'm like, you're right. I don't. Yes, ma'am.
Well, that first fight,
So
I didn't watch live, but I obviously have seen it. So I would
yeah, yeah,
predict a similar outcome in the second one.
yeah.
But you can't say that with 100% certainty because no matter how good Stipe is, I don't think there's any man alive who can take multiple shots from Francis Ngannou and stay standing.
He's so fucking big. Yeah, yeah. He's a moose.
Yeah, dude, he's like a fucking tank. But
Big, strong man.
so even if Francis wasn't going to get the next crack at Stipe, which he is, so we're kind of living now in hypothetical world. Curtis
Yeah.
Blades has a good argument. He's won 4 straight,
Yeah.
I think 4 straight since he lost to Francis. But again, he's got 2 losses to Francis, so that's why he's not getting the next shot.
Yeah, I think it's weird when you start doing like MMA math. Like he beat him, but he beat them, and like, do you remember when Gastelum was calling for a title shot, and Weidman was calling for a title shot, and Gastelum was like 4-1, and he'd been very active, but his one loss was to Weidman, who hadn't been fighting. I mean, it gives us something to talk about, but at the end of the day, I like the Derek Lewis, Curtis Blades fight. I like Ngannou getting the next shot, but like if you're Curtis Blades, even if you win that fight and Ngannou knocks off Stipe, like I don't see how they give him a third shot.
I know it's been a couple years since he fought Ngannou, and again, the more you talk about it, the more you really stray into hypothetical land. And like we said, that fight with Blades is not till November, so a lot in the world can change with injuries and everything before that fight even happens. But I think if Blades wins convincingly and Ngannou wins convincingly, I think you'd have to make that fight.
No, and here's the reason why. It all depends. I mean, they might get, again, hypotheticals, and I feel like we're taking up time with this, but if Ngannou beats Stipe, I think that they give Stipe another shot at it, or they give Stipe the winner of the Lewis Blades fight. But for what it's worth, Ngannou's, and I don't think Ngannou's going to beat Stipe.
What's tough about a lot of these guys is, like, you know, we just said we don't put a lot of stock into MMA math, but like if you're Rosenstruck, right, and if we live in a world where Ngannou is the champion and for whatever reason Stipe is unavailable or not booked for a rematch, if you're Rosenstruck, you didn't just lose to Ngannou, you got starched in 20 seconds.
Yeah, it was bad.
We all know that the UFC, they're in the business of marketing fights, and they won't make a fight if they can't market it. And it's a marketing nightmare to put a fight that's a rematch when the first one ended in 20 seconds. Yeah. So I think if you're Rosenstruck, you have to hope that by the time it's your shot at the title, anybody but Ngannou is the one holding the belt.
I get annoyed like when we talk about MMA math, but like to a certain extent, I think that that's what these fighters need to do to like motivate themselves. Like this is like a major, like they in their mind need to, sometimes looking at it straight might, you know, make it tough for these guys to stay motivated. So they find ways to spin it where, you know, okay, if I beat this guy regardless of my last loss in 18 seconds, like I can have the argument for it. And, you know, it's whatever they got to do to keep their mind right. So.
And I think with the way the heavyweight division is right now, because everyone sort of has a legitimate claim to a title shot, that means that there's a lot of scenarios where you can sort of backdoor your way into one. Any one of these guys could step in on short notice if Ngannou gets hurt.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And any of those other 3 guys would be a suit, and they would all jump at it. Like Derek Lewis, Curtis Blades, Rosenstruck, like they would all jump at it.
Yeah, and you never know what can happen. Now, especially with the Blades Derek Lewis fight, whoever wins that fight, you pretty much know you're getting the next shot.
If John Jones doesn't come up.
If John Jones doesn't come up. So there's this big unknown variable that's kind of just sitting off to the side here. And if I'm any of the guys that we talked about so far, any of these contenders, John Jones giving up his light heavyweight title, that makes me nervous because I know that my weight list just maybe grew a little bit.
Yeah. It's again, he has he has a better argument than any other champion going up in weight and getting an immediate title shot, and it's been done, and it's been done 4 times, and none of those people were as successful. Had maybe successful, but they hadn't sustained their success for as long as he has.
Do you think that anyone on this heavyweight list beats John Jones if he moves up, including Stipe? Do you think that John Jones walks through all of them, or do you think he struggles with all of them?
I don't think he walks through. I don't think, but I think he can beat all of them. Yeah, I think he can beat all of them. I mean, if you think about it, he's a nightmare for Stipe. Stylistically, he is a fucking nightmare for Stipe.
Yeah,
because Stipe's not going to be able to take him down.
No.
And Stipe's not going to stand. He's the same height as Stipe.
Yeah, if he comes in at Stipe weighed like 235 when he fought DC this last weekend, whatever it was.
That's what you're looking at. Stylistically, he is a fucking nightmare. For as long as he is, if he can, Stipe would. He found ways to capitalize on his size advantage over Cormier, his length, but it's not going to be there.
I'll tell you what, I think Stipe will struggle with the range, and I'm just basing that off of the Cormier fights where Cormier was giving up so much in reach to Stipe, and Stipe was still getting hit pretty consistently. And John Jones is going to be so much significantly longer than Cormier. I think that Stipe will wear a lot of damage in a John Jones fight. I think that one of John's biggest weapons is his athleticism. So when he puts on the size and he's going up against guys who are also that big, I don't know how that factors in. I would love to watch Stipe versus John over anybody else on this list. I don't want Ngannou to beat Stipe and then John moves up and fights Ngannou. I would prefer Stipe to beat Ngannou and John fights Stipe. And that's just my own. I like that fight more.
I don't think that Stipe is necessarily going to have a major issue with just his length, because he's fought bigger guys before. He's fought Overeem, and he's fought
you're right.
Ngannou,
you're
who
right,
are long.
But John's just very
combination, good. Right?
Yeah, John's very good at using that range.
The way that he puts it together, and then on top of that, he was able to get on top. Stipe was able to take those guys down and get on top of them. I see him having some issues with John's wrestling, and I see him, stylistically, like I said, stylistically. On paper, it's a fucking nightmare, but Stipe has that X factor, so it's definitely a fight I want to see.
I'm proud of myself because I've managed to talk this whole time about the Stipe fight with Cormier and not bring up the eye poke controversy, but there was more eye poke controversy in the fight, and
your fucking eye pokes.
This is what bothers me, and on the night, if you follow me on Twitter, I was annoyed with Daniel Cormier because he was complaining about the eye poke after the fight. Upon reflection, I don't think he was complaining. I think he was just saying what happened.
The fucking he tore his cornea.
He did, but that also happened after he had already poked Stipe. Now I'm getting annoyed that there's all these news articles about the eye pokes. Did Stipe really win? Fans complaining that he got poked in the eye. So much fan complaining about the eye poke that Mark Goddard, who I think is one of the best referees in the business, who refereed that fight, puts out a statement that he missed the eye poke when Stipe poked Cormier in the eye. The problem with this is it doesn't matter whether you missed it or not, because you didn't miss the one where Stipe got poked and you did nothing about it. So even if you noticed that Cormier got poked in the eye, you were taking no action anyway. So what does it matter that you missed it? You've already not done anything about an eye poke.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to our main topic of the evening. What rules in MMA would you change? Because mine would be the first eye poke is lose a point. No warning.
Oh, get the fuck out of here.
What right away? 1 point.
You're being extreme. That's
listen,
ridiculous.
Listen.
That's like IBJJF. Like, oh, you throw your leg over, you reap, the fucking match is over. Like,
listen.
no.
How many times do you see in a fight someone gets warned about an eye poke and magically doesn't poke in the eyes the whole rest of the fight? How many times? Every single time? Every single time there's a warning about an eye poke, the fighter somehow manages not to poke their opponent in the eyes?
What? So by that rate, anytime somebody gets kicked in the nuts, are you also taking a point away the first time?
No, but that's one of my other things was mandatory 5 minutes for the nut shot. You have to take the full 5.
All right.
I don't know why you're getting angry. I don't know why.
It's because that's silly, and you're a smart individual, and it's extreme.
All right, let's do eye poke first. Let's talk about the eye poke first.
Yeah, so I think that you need to take discretion out of it, so there could be a level of consistency from the officials, right? So the first one is a warning, and after that you take a point, and after that you take another point, and after that the fight's over.
But that's technically the same system that it has right now. You're supposed to get
no, it's
you're
not.
supposed to get a warning,
right? But it's how many times have we seen it where they get poked in the eye, they get a warning. They get poked in the eye again, and they get another warning. So it's one eye poke, warning. Second and third, it's a point, and then. Dude, in a 3-round fight, if you lose a point, like, fuck, like, that's...
But...
If you lose 2 points...
How many times have we seen someone poke someone in the eye, get a warning, but then go on to win the fight because their opponent was compromised with a poked eye? So, yeah. I think if you make a more harsh penalty for the first one, you don't have guys lunging forward with fingers out.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think... First one is a warning. Same thing with nut shots. Like the GSP Hughes, their second fight when GSP, it was in 2005, 2006, whatever it was. But GSP kicked him in the nuts like 2 or 3 times. No fucking points were taken away, and then there's no consistency. I guess it starts with the athletic commissions.
Yeah.
For the officials to follow. So do you remember, I guess the most like blatant one was when Lesnar and Mir fought for the first time, and Mazzagatti like jumped in like out of his mind, and you could tell if you go back, if anybody goes back and watches that fight, he didn't know what to do. Yeah. He was so like spastic that he just started taking a point away, and I'm like he didn't even fucking warn the guy. Like he said, watch the back of the head, and like in the same sequence he hit him, and like I don't even think he hit him once or twice, and he took a point away. Not that it mattered, but you have to. You warn him, then you take a point, then you take another point, and then you call the fight, or you warn them, then you take a point, and then you call the fight. You know,
I just think that something needs to change. If they're not going to use new gloves like Trevor Whitman's gloves that he's talked about for a long time. You have to change something because, again, it wouldn't have changed anything in this fight because Mark Goddard didn't see it. So I'm not trying to retroactively apply rules to a fight that's already happened. I'm just tired of seeing eye pokes because guys are pawing forward. And we've talked about this previously. Like you do parry punches and you hand fight. It happens, but you can also do it without putting your hand flat horizontal to the ground and coming forward.
Well, again, number one, Joe Rogan's always been, vocal about like these are the risks that you run when you have, open fingered gloves. You know what I mean? So that's that. I don't like in order to effectively parry and sometimes it's not like a jab, but like if you're parrying and you come down, like it's just, and sometimes it is completely incidental where, you're managing the distance, you move in, the guy moves in at the same time, and it just happens. So it's accidental sometimes. Sometimes it's just, I don't want to say it's intentional, but it's just the way that people are. But yeah, I don't agree that a point should be taken
for the first one. The thing with the groin shots. This is my thing with the groin shot. I think a lot of pressure comes on to the fighter who was fouled with the groin shot that, like, let's go, let's get back to the fight. Like, let's go, don't take the full time. You've been hit low before, and you know that in 1 minute you're not better. You're still fighting compromise. But I think there's an external pressure to get the fight going again, that you might start that round even though you're not fully recovered. Getting hit like that does take something from your gas tank. It takes something internally, and it takes time to get that back. So if you make it mandatory that they have to take the full 5, it takes that pressure off the fighter, and you might get a 5-minute delay in your fight, but your fight will be better because that fighter will be more able to resume fighting. That's just my take.
Yeah, it was on the fight before Chris Dawkins' fight. Like one of the guys was turning it up in the third round, and he had, I forget their names, but he had the one guy on the run. The guy who was on the run got kicked in the nuts, and then they gave him like 3 or 4 or whatever, however many minutes. But he was hurting, and he was fading fast in that fight. And then they give him 3, 4, 5 minutes, and I know that it's not his fault that he got kicked in the nuts.
Yeah,
but it's tough. I think the same. I would apply the same rules. One time is a warning. The next time, even if it's fucking incidental.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, the same thing I said with the eye pokes. How many times do you see someone warned about throwing the inside leg kick because they came a little high on it, and for the rest of the fight, they don't kick the person in the nuts, which means that you're able to fight without doing it.
How many times have you seen, and that's the other thing, it needs to be reviewed. So that needs to be reviewed. If you were to implement some type of like mandatory rest period, it needs to be reviewed and verified that it was a nut shot. Like that, when Hughes got kicked in the nuts by Frank Trigg, and what was the other thing with Koscheck? Like
Koscheck had a knee on the ground and pretended that GSP kneed him in the face to get extra time, but on this.
No, what? Was it GSP or was it Anthony Johnson?
Ooh, you might have stumped me on that.
Anyway,
yeah.
So regardless, like if you're giving these guys, like regardless of the injury or whatever it is, like you need to start verifying that this shit actually happened.
If someone fakes a nut shot to get more time to rest, and they review it, 1-point penalty.
Oh, get the fuck out of here! If somebody fakes a nut shot to get a 5-minute rest, disqualify them.
DQ.
Yeah, I mean,
so you'll jump right to a DQ, but you won't take 1 point for an eye poke.
Yeah, well, because I don't think the eye poke's intentional. But if you're intentionally faking something to give yourself an edge in the fight because you don't like the way things are going, or because you need a break, outside of the rule set, then yeah, fuck. Like that was the bullshit with Yoel Romero and Tim Kennedy. Yoel Romero between rounds 2 and 3 was on his stool for like a minute and a half, and he wouldn't get up, and they kept calling him up, and then I think he ended up knocking him out or whatever. But he won the fight, and he should have never. They should have never continued the fight. Like they should have fucking called it when he didn't get off the stool. Like he's trying to give himself another rest. Outside of the rules. Yeah. So.
I have 2 points about scoring. They're not necessarily rules, but they apply to the way the fight is scored. Number 1, it should be live scoring. You should know after each round who's won, and it shouldn't be a guess when it goes to the judges' scorecards.
I agree.
It shouldn't be. Olympic boxing does it. Every other professional sport in the world, you know what the score is as you're going through. There's no reason to not know what the score is.
I agree.
The other scoring thing, and again, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, so I'm sure that whatever. If you're on your back and you're in your guard and you're doing damage, that should score the same way as someone who's on top.
I don't think anybody's going to argue. Like what you're saying in theory is right, and I knew you were going to say something like that. But yeah, it's the problem true. It's just not reality. It doesn't happen.
The problem is, as we've discussed previously, these judges are not trained martial artists. Some of them have never taken a jiu-jitsu class a day in their life, so they think if you're on your back, you're losing. And look at how many fights Tony Ferguson has had where he's in his guard doing more damage than the guy who's on top of him. But he's probably losing that fight on some judges' scorecards, and he shouldn't be. If you're on your back and you're doing damage, that's just as important as damage that's done on top.
I agree. I agree. Tony Ferguson's probably the best example of it in MMA. Donald Cerrone has a very good active guard too. So does Nate Diaz. But Tony Ferguson just fucking
Yeah.
carves people up from the bottom.
And having an active guard shouldn't only mean you submit people from there, because it's hard to submit people, especially when you're fighting the best guys in the world.
Yeah.
So if you're on your back and you are not able to complete an armbar or not able to complete a triangle, but you're there for 3 minutes and you're beating them up with elbows and punches from the bottom, doing visible damage, that should count. Especially if the guy on top is not working as hard as you are.
Again, it's really hard to like establish some type of consistency with the way judges score fights because it's a discretionary
It's subjective.
thing. It's subjective. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that anybody, taking that statement at face value would disagree with you. But again, subjective judges or yeah.
If we look at jiu-jitsu, do you want to guess what I have 4 written down.
Yeah.
Do you want to guess what they are?
Yeah, so I don't know what all 4 of them are, but I can guarantee you that one of them has to do with letting either reaping or the saddle position in without being penalized or without having your match stopped by a referee who doesn't know fucking dick about jiu-jitsu.
That would be number 1. I went all the way and just said heel hooks in the gi, and we'll debate that in a second.
Yeah,
but
I don't think so.
What Mike's referencing is I had a super fight on a show like more than a year ago, and it was in the gi, and I hit like a step back. The guy tried to pull guard. I stepped back into the saddle, and I was not attacking the heel. I just had the legs entangled, and I was attacking his far leg. And the ref stopped the fight because he said I was reaping my opponent's leg, which was against the rules, which, again, my point of it shouldn't be. But I wasn't doing that. He just didn't know what the position was, and he took away a dominant position from me. So
it was and it was even by IBJJF standards, it was illegal. Yeah, as long as you're not attacking.
Yeah,
or even touching that far side.
Exactly. The IBJJF rule book at last time I read it, you can have the saddle. Some people call it the honey hole, the 411, all these different names. You can be in the saddle so long as you don't touch the foot of the leg you have entangled. You're legal. You can touch the far leg. You can grab that as much as you want.
You can even touch. I believe you can even touch the far leg. To the leg that you have entangled, causing like a calf crush.
Yes, I believe that's legal as well. But if you get disqualified,
whatever. So we didn't even get to that point.
Yeah.
In Justin's match, this guy who obviously didn't know dick about the rules or anything stops the fight mid-match, and not even mid-match. It was like 30 seconds into the match. He takes them out of the position. That wasn't. Not before Justin argued with the guy while maintaining the saddle position, or the other guy was just sitting there.
I did offer to teach him what the position was as the match was happening, but
put up a clip.
I just posted on my Instagram a little while ago. I'll put it up on the show's Instagram.
Yeah,
you can be the judge. Continue your guessing though. You've got 3 more rules that I wrote down to talk about.
So heel hooks in the gi. Does any of it have to do with scoring?
Yes.
So no points?
No advantages.
Yeah.
Get rid of advantages. And the last 2 I don't think you're going to get, but those were the 2 I knew you would get cuz heel hooking in the gi, if you can knee bar in the gi, if you can straight foot lock in the gi, you should be able to heel hook in the gi once you get to brown or black belt. I'm not saying blue belts and purple belts should be able to. I understand that twisting the knee is more dangerous and more damaging than anything straight like a knee bar or a foot lock.
You know the reasoning behind that, and I tend to err on the side of caution. Like, listen, I think everybody should drill foot locks and leg locks and, heel hooks, and you should have an understanding. And as you rise through the ranks, you should become proficient in everything. But when you have pants, like when you have those gi pants on, it just gives that much more grip to these holds.
Correct, but it also gives more grip to choking your opponent. It gives more grip to armbarring your opponent. So I understand that argument. I understand how friction works. I'm not a scientist, but I get it. It's as I've said previously, it's a very dangerous submission, but so is every submission. It's just the stakes are higher. So if you get hurt with your knee, it's a much higher stake than if you get over armbarred. I get it. But when we're talking about brown and black belts, they should know where their limit is already, and they are competent enough grapplers to make the decision whether they want to tap or not. And you can make that decision with every other submission. I'm a leg lock guy, so I'm obviously going to come down on that side.
I'm on board with the advantages. Like, I'm on board with your thought process behind that. We've talked about that before. Again, it's just, I don't know whether you need to I think we talked about this very early on in the show, right? Like one of the first couple episodes, but like, I don't know whether you need to establish some type of like overtime format, but it just invites controversy. It completely subjective. There's not a lot of consistency in it. It's up to the judges. I've seen fucking people get Danny Mara was fighting at the Euros and got fucked out of a match because of an advantage. Imagine traveling over to fucking Europe and seeing, and you're a match away from the podium and you get fucked because some referee doesn't know what he's doing and gives an advantage for something that shouldn't have been an advantage, or doesn't give points for a sweep. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's subjective. But go ahead.
I don't think the mount should score as highly as it does because I don't think it's a visually dominant position and there are attacks from there, but I think you have less attacks from the mount than you do other positions. So the origins of that position being the worst spot for self-defense and the worst spot in the street, I get that, but I just don't think it should score as highly. I think the back should score more than the mount.
Yeah. I agree.
I agree with that. My last one you will not agree with, which is why I saved it for the end, because I know we're going to argue.
Because you're conflict seeking again. This is becoming it.
It's becoming a theme. I think it should be sort of a reverse ADCC. I think that there should be no points in the last 2 minutes of a match. I think it should be only submissions at that point.
That's silly. So, but the points in the beginning of the match count?
Yes. Because I've had a couple matches where if it's a 5-minute match at a tournament, someone might you might pull guard, someone's in your guard, and they're content to stay there and not move and do just enough to not get called for stalling. And their goal is they're going to explode in the last 30 seconds and hope for an advantage or hope for 2 points for a pass and not give you enough time to get the points back. And they're just going to stall for 4.5 minutes. I think if you made it that you could only submit in the last 2 minutes, it would take that strategy away because I don't like that strategy.
No, I don't know. I don't know if the logistics of it would work. But I agree that's it's a bitch way out.
Yeah.
Just settling in, playing towards the clock. Yeah. I feel like the IBJJF kind of just invites that kind of mindset through their rule set.
When we talked to Mason Fowler, and I'll link to it up here, if you click this card up here, that interview with Mason Fowler, he talked about there's no perfect rule set. There's all different rule sets that favor different style grapplers, and I'm obviously going to pick the rule sets that I like that favor me. So
yeah.
The ideal rule set for me would be no advantages. I can heel hook you in the gi. There's no points in the last 2 minutes, so a boring wrestler can't stall me out. And I don't use the mount that often, so I don't need the points for it.
Yeah, you can argue flaws in any rule set. There's no perfect rule set. If there was a perfect rule set, everybody would do it.
What would you change about jiu-jitsu competition?
I think that I would take the advantages out of it. I would institute some type of challenge system for when these fucking idiot referees start blowing calls and ruining people's fucking dreams. And I just think that they jump to if you reap, I was a white belt. I remember this. I was a white belt, and we were fighting at the New York Open, and we had a couple people there, and Dave Reef Snyder, I think, was fighting for. He was a blue belt, whatever, or maybe a purple belt, whatever. He got called for reaping, and it wasn't even a reap, and the match is over. Yeah. They don't warn you. Like at Fight to Win, like if you're reaping in the gi, they'll stop and they'll reset you and whatever. Like now, if you're reaping in the gi and you start fucking cranking for heels or something, like I understand that, but like this, like I've seen matches get stopped where people have fucking pushed a leg past their hip line. Say a guy's in a single leg X or something, and he pushes his foot, the guy's foot over his own hip line, and I've seen matches get called for that.
It sucks. It's a stupid rule.
Yeah, but these judges there's too much power, and there's nothing to hold them accountable. And you think of guys who this is their livelihood, and you're fucking with people's lives.
Not even livelihood.
If doing this.
If I paid $120 to go for a tournament, and in the first match I'm gonna lose on an advantage, or I'm gonna lose because of a judgment call on whether my foot was on the hip or in front of the hip by a couple centimeters, I'm gonna be pissed. So get rid of it.
But like, look at the ADCC match, and this is between Nick Rodriguez and Cyborg. Now, I'm not a Cyborg fan. I think he's an incredible talent, but I'm just not really a fan. And it's like what Nick Rodriguez did was completely inspiring. Like training jiu-jitsu like for like 9 months and went. But when that match was over, I was like, oh, Cyborg's got this, and then it's just like he doesn't. Yeah. I don't know how they scored it. There's no explanation by the judges. I don't know how many people scored it, and they just gave it to Nick Rodriguez. And and like I said, it was inspiring to see somebody train jiu-jitsu for less than a year. But like, there's no explanation by these judges on it. And that was a match that could have went either way, but you wouldn't have got an explanation. And I think that if you talk to people who are like objectively watching it, the majority of them would have said that even though it was a tight match, they had Cyborg winning, but nobody knows. Nobody knows why it went down the way it did.
Yeah. I would love it if the practicality, it's not logistically possible, and I would love it if judges had to explain their decision in MMA and in jiu-jitsu. I would love it if someone makes a really weird scorecard or makes a very strange judgment call, they had to answer why.
So here's another problem. If you have an MMA guy who's knowledgeable in combat sports or mixed martial arts or anything, jiu-jitsu, and they have a basic understanding of it, and therefore they are a fan of the UFC or they watch the UFC, or MMA or whatever, they're gonna have fighters that they like and fighters that they don't, and they're gonna have their own biases that it's difficult to take out of this. So what do you do then? So then you get people who aren't jiu-jitsu practitioners, who aren't mixed martial artists, who aren't fans of MMA or the UFC, and now you got people judging fights based on like the fucking criteria that they put on the TV screen before each fight, and these people don't know what the fuck they're looking for, and then you get scores that are completely out of this world. So it's a double-edged sword.
Should we add one to the MMA rules? I would change that you have to be at least a purple belt to be an MMA referee or a judge.
Yeah. That's like those referees, they make like the big time referees, they make $1,900 a fight. And some of those, like when they, like for not like a card, like a heavyweight championship fight, I think, or not just any championship fight. Yeah.
Is there anything else you would change about jiu-jitsu competition, rules wise?
No, I like Fight to Win. I do. Yep. I like the way that they do it. I like Eddie Bravo's thing, and like I do, like I see I do like points jiu-jitsu. Like I like it all. I like training for it all. So,
well, like we said previously on I think it was last episode or whatever, train for everything. I don't want to train for just sub only. I don't want to train for just the IBJJF. I don't want to train just for Fight to Win. Train everything, but let's start heel hooking in the gi.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget that you can watch the video versions of every episode on YouTube. You just have to search for That Jiu-Jitsu Podcast on YouTube. If you want to follow the show on Instagram, you can find us at that_jiu-jitsu_podcast. And if you want to follow me directly, you can find me at m_Callahan106.
If you want to follow me directly, you can find me at Justin Lesko. We're still giving away a free t-shirt for anyone who subscribes to us on Patreon. There's a lot of bonus content there that you don't get by just subscribing to this podcast feed or just by watching the YouTube page. Patreon.com/thatjujitsupodcast. There's tiers that start as low as $3. You get technique breakdowns, you get bonus content. So check it out. Get a free t-shirt. Patreon.com/thatjujitsupodcast. Say heel hooks in the gi.
Absolutely not.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.